I was playing Roblox one day, like I do every day, when I stumbled upon a game called Strategema. Well, actually, it was 4 times I stumbled upon this game, and it just so happens that this was the 4th time. However, this time I actually played the game for once. I know, shocking. And I actually liked it this time, so I might as well join the Discord to see what was going on there and how often videos were being made. And then I stumbled onto the competitive scene through the videos of Strategema. Stamp Pot Guy, one of the tournament moderators, asked to play with me, said I was about a 7 out of 10, which I agreed with, and then invited me to their tourney Discord server. At this time, I've shown my editor Ryan the game, and we both got hooked. This video is pretty much everything that I've learned since starting and competing in numerous tournaments. So with that, let's get into the tips and tricks plus badges for Strategema. For Strategema, players must research technologies, build cities, and conduct diplomacy to satisfy endgame criterion. This video will hopefully give you an understanding of different strategies and tactics necessary to win at a competitive level. Every game plays out differently, so there isn't really one strategy that you can follow to ensure victory. Rather, you can try to play one way and then make changes and reads based on the map and how your opponent is playing. There are 2 main strategies that I like to go for though, either going for early satellites or going for globalization. They both have their own benefits and setbacks, but it's really up to personal preference. If you go for satellites early, your main focus is on making a military and catching your opponent off guard. The first thing you want to do is to get one city with 5 farms and a research center. Then once you do that, you want to get your second city. As your second city is building, you want to get a university in your first city and then max out your second one. You have a few options on what you research first. The first thing you should do is research towards deep drills. If you don't find the pump early on the map and you plan to play a late game strategy, then you should go with deep drills to build up an economic advantage. After getting to deep drills, you can research markets and vehicles before working towards getting satellites. As you work towards getting satellites, start to build up a basic army in case your opponent rushes you, and to prepare for when you can eventually rush your opponent back. Then, once you get satellites, you can create an army specifically based on what your opponent is doing and try to catch them off guard to win the game. We'll talk more about different attacks and counters later, but for now, let me go for my second strategy. The other strategy that I like to do during Strategema is to go for globalization. This strategy is best for getting an economic lead, but is more passive. It can also set you back with research, as 2 of the items you research are barely ever used at all during competitive play, so that could be a problem. Also, if you go for this strategy, you can't have your cities too far away from each other, as this strategy works best when they're close by. When going for this strategy, you want to get a city with a research center and university. Then, as you build more cities, give them a research center and a university as well. Typically during this strategy, you'll want to go for vehicles so that you can get the scout car, so hopefully you can find the pump first. In some cases, you can research deep drills first, although this will mean that you'll get globalization a lot later. I would really only get deep drills if you don't know where the second pump is, like if you're on an island or something, but you should at least get refinement. Once you do that, research markets before starting on arts and guard towers. Markets are pretty much the basis of this strategy, and they can also help with maintaining resources, so it's a win-win. After all of that, you research globalization, the main thing that you're working for. Once they spawn, they'll drive to a random city, and then once they get to that city, they will then disappear and you will gain a certain amount of resources. This means that the more markets you have, the more trucks there will be, and the closer your cities are, the quicker they'll produce resources. After globalization, you should start developing your military and work to find the second pump. In terms of your research, you should start working towards satellites and then everything else. Alright, I think that's everything for those strategies, so now let's get into the actual units that you can use during the game. There are many different units which all have different uses for exploring, battle, and other various things. I'll go through every individual unit, how you can combo units, and how to counter your opponent's units. Starting with the most basic unit, the infantry units. The first and most basic unit is the scout. You start the game with 1 scout, and it's likely that this is the only scout you'll have throughout the game, as they're kinda bad. It's mainly used for exploring in the early game and keeping track of where your opponent is. They can also be used as a meat shield against naval units, as naval units are surprisingly weak to infantry. Its stats are 100 health, 2 damage, 2 range, 6 vision, and 0.8 attack per second, and a movement speed of 0.8. The next unit is the soldier. It's the most basic attacking unit and it isn't used very often. It's mainly used for early rushes or to be used as a meat shield to protect your more important units during an attack. Its stats are 125 health, 3 damage, 3 range, 3 vision, 0.5 attack per second, and a movement speed of 1.1. The third infantry unit is the bazooka. It deals high damage to buildings and machinery units, especially APCs. However, it deals very low damage to other infantry units. It's also one of the slowest infantry units, with the movement speed of 1.3. Its stats are 125 health, 3 damage, 3 range, 3 vision, and 0.4 attack speed, and of course a movement speed of 1.3, which is pretty slow. The fourth infantry unit is the flamethrower. It deals high damage to buildings, like a mini artillery, but it does very little in combat and has very low health. It can only attack one space in front of it and can't attack diagonally, so it has to be right next to the thing that it's attacking, which isn't very useful. Its stats are 100 health, 1 damage, 1 range, 3 vision, 2 attacks per second. Its movement speed is 1.15, alright, it's a little slow, but not too much. The final infantry unit is the CBRN soldier, which is very similar to the normal soldier, except it's the only unit that can survive in radiation and has slightly better stats. The only downside is that you first have to research ballistic missiles in order to spawn it. Its stats are 150 health, 4 damage, 3 range, 3 vision, 0.5 attacks per second, and a movement speed of 1.4. In general, all of the infantry units are good for the early game and mid game, but fall off steeply as you start to get access to better units. The next units we'll go over are the machinery units. To create machinery units, you need a factory, and to get a factory, you must research machinery. The first machinery unit is the scout car, which is pretty much just a scout that can see more and moves a lot faster. By getting 2 of them, you can easily explore the whole map if there aren't any rivers, and you only need 1 at your opponent's base to pretty much see everything that they're doing. However, they have very little health and cannot attack. Its stats are 170 health, 0 damage, 0 range of course, 8 vision, 0 attacks per second, and a movement speed of 0.5. The second machinery unit are the APCs. APCs are the cheapest machinery units that are good in battle and are good for taking down infantry units. They can even be used to tank for your tanks, and they can also be used to catch your opponents off guard and rush them early. Its stats are 200 health, 5 damage, 3 range, 3 vision, 0.4 attacks per second, and a movement speed of 0.8. The next machinery unit is the tank. This unit is pretty much the best unit in the game, as it's a jack of all trades. It deals high damage and destroys most other units, as well as dealing high damage to buildings. Most attacks in the late game consist of pretty much all tanks, sometimes with a few other units to act as meat shields, but it's mostly just tanks. Its stats are 200 health, 6 damage, 4 range, 4 vision, 0.36 attacks per second, and a movement speed of 0.95. The next unit is the artillery. This unit is very slow but deals massive damage to buildings. However, it can't attack other units, so they have to be protected in battle. Its stats are 200 health, 20 damage, 5 range, 3 vision, 0.28 attacks per second, and a movement speed of 1.75. The final machinery unit is the anti-air. As the name suggests, it deals very high damage to aircrafts, but isn't good for much else. Since aircrafts are so weak compared to other units, anti-air is rarely even needed. Its stats are 150 health, 15 damage, 4 range, 5 vision, 0.3 attacks per second, and a movement speed of 0.9. The third category of units are the aircrafts. These are considered the weakest units, although some of them can be used for exploring and destroying your opponent's buildings. The first aircraft is the Zeppelin. The Zeppelin is an early aircraft unit that is very weak but deals high damage to buildings. It's rarely used in competitive play, as just one anti-air can counter them, and people don't even need anti-air to counter them, they can just use basic infantry units. If you do use them, you must protect them with jets or even tanks, so it's really not worth using them. Its stats are 120 health, 5 damage, 0 range, 3 vision, 0.5 attacks per second, and a movement speed of 1.75. The next aircraft unit is the jet. The jet is very good against other aircraft and is very quick. However, you can only get it if you research advanced aviation. By the time you research advanced aviation, you'll likely have explored most of the map anyway and have access to anti-aircraft. If you're on a map with a lot of different islands, however, it can be good to explore those islands to get the pump and to start destroying your opponent's buildings before they can defend. Its stats are 120 health, 7 damage, 2 range, 4 vision, 0.5 attacks per second, and a movement speed of 0.7. The final aircraft unit is the bomber. It's good against buildings and land units, and it can be good to destroy your opponent's buildings early before they're prepared, like the jet. However, it's still very weak to pretty much all units, but especially anti-air. Its stats are 250 health, 10 damage, 0 range, 3 vision, 0.5 attacks per second, and a movement speed of 1.25. Finally, there are the naval units. These units will be very good against your opponent if they have cities on the coast, but unfortunately they're weak to infantry units and can't be used in many games if the map does not have a lot of water. The first naval unit is the Frigate. I don't know how it's pronounced, whatever. It's a quick and cheap early game unit. It's the only naval unit that actually does well against infantry and can also be used to get oil slicks, which, if you have multiple, give a huge economic boost against your opponent. Its stats are 150 health, 5 damage, 2 range, 5 vision, 0.6 attacks per second, and a movement speed of 0.75. The next unit is the Destroyer. The Destroyer is mainly used for air patrol, which isn't very good considering that aircraft already suck in the game, but it is what it is. It can also detect submarines underwater, which is one of its more useful features. Its stats are 200 health, 6 damage, 4 range, 4 vision, 0.4 attacks per second, and a movement speed of 0.9. The third naval unit is the Cruiser. It's a moderately slow and heavy unit, but is very strong against machinery. Its stats are 275 health, 7 damage, 5 range, 5 vision, 0.6 attacks per second, and a movement speed of 1.25. The fourth naval unit is the Submarine. It's very strong against all navy except for the Destroyer. Also, after it attacks, it submerges underwater, making it impossible for your opponent to see it. However, it can't attack buildings or any other type of unit. Its stats are 175 health, 25 damage, 3 range, 3 vision, 0.2 attacks per second, and a movement speed of 1.5. The final unit is a Sea Lift. The Sea Lift is unlike any other unit as it can actually transport other units. It can hold up to 10 population worth of units, 10 infantry units, or 5 machinery units. This means that if your opponent is on a different island, then you can bring your army to them. However, the Sea Lift is slow and has very low health and can't attack, so it's kind of defenseless if any other units are attacking it. Also, if any units are on the Sea Lift when it dies, all of those units also die, so it's a big risk but also can be a big reward. Its stats are 200 health, 0 damage, 0 range, 4 vision, 0 attacks per second, and a movement speed of 0.7. Those are all of the normal units. There is one more special unit which can be gotten at the market. This unit is the Settler. You can move this unit around away from your main city and set up a new city wherever your settler is. Using the Settler, you're able to make a city near your opponent's cities, making your attack much easier to get to your opponent. You can also put the Settler on a Sea Lift and then set up a city on your opponent's island if you're on different islands. The Settler's stats are 100 health, 0 damage, 0 range, 6 vision, 0 attacks per second, and a movement speed of 0.7. Now, once I've gone over all of those units, let's go into tips and tricks. The next section is kind of just a combination of a bunch of miscellaneous things since I already went over my strategies earlier. The first tip I'll give is to control the pump. In a 1v1 match, there's only one or maybe even might not be any pumps in a match. So having control over that pump will give you a huge boost against your opponent. If you somehow can't find the pump or can't find any oil slicks, then you can still use deep drills as they are your next best option. A good way to know if your opponent is going to attack you is if their points start going up quickly. Understanding the point system is crucial to winning games and knowing what your opponent is doing. The main thing to keep in mind is that each research project gives 100 points. Every 5 resources they have gives them 1 point, each building gives them a few points, and finally, units give a lot of points. For the most part, your points should be pretty even, so if you see your opponent's points shoot up and you don't see them researching, then that likely means that they're making an army and planning an attack. Another thing to keep in mind, and something that most people don't know, is that when researching, you can actually skip certain research projects. For example, once you get ballistic missiles, you can then research advanced aviation, radar defense, or civil defense. However, to move anything below that row, you must have all the things above it researched. It also allows you to research orbital bombardment before researching the International Space Station, which saves a lot of time researching. When in battle, one strategy is to use missiles to deal damage to your opponent's units. Just one missile will one-shot all infantry units on a tile and will deal around half the health of most machinery units. To avoid this yourself, you'll need to micromanage your units. To do this, you just need to keep moving your units around so they're not on one tile for too long. You can also use this technique to move in and out of range of your enemy's units. For example, if you have a tank against an APC, since the tank has much more range than the APC, you can space your tank out just outside of the APC's range while still hitting and killing them. There are likely more tips that I haven't thought of, but this video is really long already, so we just need to move it along. Alright, this section is going to be pretty quick since most of the badges in this game are either really easy or impossible to get. The first badge is the Untitled Colors badge. It can be achieved by having 6 players in a match and having them all make peace with each other. The second achievement is Domination. It's simply obtained by winning a game, which after this video should hopefully be easy for you. DEFCON 1 can be achieved by launching a nuke. Pretty easy, you just need to research a nuke first. Science Victory can be achieved by researching the ISS and then launching it from outer space, winning the game. The Culture Victory can be achieved by researching wonders, getting an art institute, and then building and defending 2 world wonders. Capital Recapture can be achieved by reclaiming your capital after your opponent takes it, but you only have 1 minute to do this before your opponent wins, so you gotta be quick. The final achievement you can get right now is Armageddon, which is achieved by causing Armageddon, which happens when the Armageddon clock reaches 0. You know, Armageddon, Armageddon, Armageddon. I'm surprised I did that, wow, okay. Every nuke that is launched during a round will tick down the Armageddon clock until it reaches 0, which will cause everyone to lose the match. How long the Armageddon clock is depends on how many players there are, so if you want to get this badge with someone else, just only have one person and then take turns. The final 4 badges are no longer possible to get because they were just seasonal events. These achievements are Survived Sector 28, Santa's Winter Fortress, and an extraterrestrial encounter. So, that is everything I've learned since I've started playing the game. This game has so much depth to it, and even after playing this game for a really long time, I'm still not really one of the top players yet. I would highly recommend checking this game out if you haven't already, and please support the game so that hopefully the creator will update the game soon. Also, this video would have been much harder to make if it weren't for the dedicated people who run the Strategema wiki, and the people who help keep this game alive by hosting Strategema tournaments. Also, before I go, we should rename it to Strategema, just saying.